What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week on YouTube, including the new My Soccer series that officially launched the first episode yesterday. That would be Tuesday, so be sure to check out that as well. So much to get to today. Breaking it down into two segments as normal. Lionel Messi suspended, Concacaf Champions League semifinal to talk about, everything happening at Leeds, midweek action. I'm going to cover all of it, beginning with what happened in LA on Tuesday night. LAFC once again get past the Philadelphia Union to return to the Concacaf Champions League final. Got the goal they needed in Philly. Comprehensive win in the end in the second leg in LA. I want to start with the Union side of this, though. And I'm going to save the LAFC stuff for the end. If you're Jim Curtin, if you're Ernst Tanner, what is so infuriating about this is that they are not getting outplayed by LAFC. If you go look generally over the series, but specifically these last three meetings, they had MLS Cup 1. Were they great in that game? No. But did they keep LAFC in check and go toe-to-toe with them? Absolutely. And then they made the play to get the goal to go up a man, and then Gareth Bale happened. Maybe they weren't the better team, but it was dead even. And then you look at these two legs. Philly was excellent in leg one. LAFC offered very little going forward, and the Union played right through them. They should have won at least 2-0, based on the chances they had. Instead, they draw 1-1 because they don't take most of their chances, and Kellen Acosta, just like he did in MLS Cup, scores a bizarre, massive goal to change the complexion of the game. He had that deflected free kick in MLS Cup. This was the strange goal where he just kind of kicks the ball into the ground and it pops up in the right way and gets past Andre Blake. And then all of a sudden you go from having, a lead, not conceding an away goal in a tournament where that still matters, to you have to score and you have to get at least a 2-2 draw if you're going to avoid extra time going into LA. It just changed the complexion of that second leg. Didn't decide anything, but made the Union's life obviously a lot more difficult. That was completely in their control. They thoroughly outplayed LAFC in that first leg and ended up with a 1-1 draw that just wasn't good enough. And then you get to leg two. They didn't do all that much, and they give up. LAFC deserved that goal one way or another because that was a phenomenal save by Andre Blake to keep the first effort out. I believe it was Ilya who had the header, and then they get the rebound, put it in. That was the best chance of the game. LAFC took advantage. But outside of that, you were keeping yourself in the game. Union created a couple decent chances. Were they the better team? No. But again, they were hanging in there just fine in that really intimidating environment. Until Olivier Mbaizo decides to end the game in the 60th minute. And this might be my biggest pet peeve in all of sports, is a lack of emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. The first yellow he gets is just for shoving somebody because he wanted to. At the end of a play where the Union drew a yellow card and got a foul. And now you've got your right back on Dennis Bouanga's side of the field playing with a yellow. And he doesn't even last 15 minutes into the second half, and he picks up the second one. On, again, an incredibly unintelligent challenge that you simply cannot make on a yellow card. He didn't need to do it anyway, and it was a second yellow. There's nothing more to say about it. And at that point, you're down a goal. You need 1 to get to extra time, 2 to actually advance, and it's just not happening. And then LAFC kind of pour the goals on late. But that wasn't a 3-goal deficit in that game. LAFC, yes, they had the better chances. The numbers were in their favor. But until that red card, Union were doing fine. Maybe they get the goal to make it interesting. Maybe they don't. It's entirely possible that game ends 1-0, 2-0 anyway. But to have those 3 games and to not win any of them because of things you can control, at no point in these 3 games, and just generally in the series between these 2 teams, and this is one of the things I brought up before MLS Cup, at no point did it ever feel like the Union were outmatched. And yet they just let these opportunities slip away. And your margin of error is so slim against LAFC that when you actually make them look vulnerable and make them look normal, like the Union did in that first leg, you have to take advantage. You just have to. And they didn't. But from a Union's perspective, I just don't look at this and say, well, they're not good enough, they can't do it. LAFC is just too much firepower. Because they're matching up just fine with them. They're just not executing. And those Kellen Acosta goals just kind of came out of nowhere. And they weren't able to respond. But you removed yourself from having the opportunity because Olivier Mbaizo excused himself from the game. And like I said, that might be my biggest pet peeve, is just not being aware of the situation and being able to keep your emotions under control. The second part of this on the Union side is Jim Curtin. He's getting a lot of criticism for not using that bench. And yes, he needs to use that bench more. This goes back to the COVID game against NYCFC in the Eastern Conference Final 2 seasons ago, the one that they lost. That game was headed in one direction, and NYCFC were going to get that goal that ultimately sent them to MLS Cup before it went to a penalty shootout. You could feel it coming, and Jim Curtin didn't do anything about it. That was the first time I really noticed this, and it's come up multiple times since then, specifically in this game. And yes, it's difficult because you're down to 10, and they don't have the depth LAFC have. And you lost your one kind of big-time weapon off the bench in Corey Burke this offseason. But it is fair to get on Jim Curtin for that. You got to use your bench more. Especially when you have a right back and a right-sided midfielder. Ali Bedoya could have gotten a red. I do think yellow was the right call, but it was close. You got both those guys on yellow cards in the first half. And it didn't feel like Mbaizo was really in control there. There's an argument he should have just been subbed at halftime because you couldn't trust him. And so the Union brought multiple players in this offseason to have the depth to be able to kind of navigate all this better. And then didn't use those players. Now, Damian Lowe was really good in this tournament until it got to the business end and the other 2 starting center backs took his spot. But you also had, a couple other pieces that could have factored into this game and factored into the series more that really just didn't get the opportunity. And Jim Curtin has to answer for that. Now, the other part of this is same thing I've been talking about with Graham Potter. I can only get on Jim Curtin so much because what is he supposed to do when his players don't convert the one-on-ones against the goalkeeper they had in the first leg? And when his right back makes those kind of decisions and his captain almost gets himself sent off in the first, 3 minutes of the game. And then gets the yellow card so he has to play differently for the other 87. This is on the players too. Your job as a manager is to put your team in position to succeed. In the first leg, Jim Curtin 100% did that. Second leg, okay, that's a little more debatable. I'm just not willing to make this a massive, and really what it comes down to is I'm not willing to make this a massive commentary on the Union yet. Maybe last season was the peak. Maybe it was. But to me, they were the best team in the league last season. I will not back down from that. They went toe-to-toe with LAFC in that stadium. They had the better goal difference. They were even on points. they had that game won. Now this season, they have not been anywhere near as good as LAFC, and they didn't do what they needed to in that first leg, and they got outplayed in the second one, in large part because of their own doing, because they were down a man for the last 30 minutes of the game. I'm going to give this time. I'm not going to freak out about it. I'm not going to say that this is kind of over, that they don't have the pieces. Need to see how the rest of the season goes. On the LAFC side, the big thing I want to hammer home here is that Steve Cherundolo and this team and this technical staff, going all the way up to John Thornton, do not get enough credit for the tactical transformation that has gone on within this club. I firmly believe if this is still Bob Bradley's LAFC, they lose MLS Cup final, if they even get there, and maybe they find a way to get out of this tie. Maybe. But I don't think they get the goal in Philly, and that changes the conversation. Why? Because they have found a way to not be so reliant on essentially being a Manchester City, right? Where you need to control every aspect of the game, possession, expansive, intricate, and if one thing kind of goes off the rails, you're in trouble. That was their problem in the postseason. I talked about this all the time during their run to MLS Cup. Do they have a plan B? Can they adjust when plan A goes wrong? And what they're showing you is 100% they can. MLS Cup, leg 1, leg 2 of the Concacaf Champions League. They gave the Union the ball. Said, here, try and beat us. Bob Bradley's team would have never done that in a million years. And it worked. Because the Union didn't take their chances. LAFC did. Because they're so dynamic on the counter now. And yes, if they need to, they can go pick you apart and they can, kind of systematically rip through your defense. If they need to. But they can also go, we have an away goal. We scored the first goal of the game because we're dominant on set pieces. We don't have to go get the second one. We can sit here, absorb some pressure, and try and hit them on the counter. And then eventually that led to goal 2 and 3. They are so much more versatile and so much better equipped to win trophies. Because whether it's MLS Cup, whether it's US Open Cup, whether it's Concacaf Champions League, you have got to be able to adapt to the situation. You have to be able to win multiple ways because weird things happen and you only get that one or those 2 games, right? This isn't about being the best team over 34. This is about being the best team on that day or those 2 days. And it's the same conversation we're having about Manchester City in the Champions League. When you can be this good on the counter, when you can sit back without the ball and be so good with the ball, it allows you to play differently based on the situation. If you give up a goal, it's not the end of the world because you've got a team that can go apply pressure for 15, 30 minutes at a time and just pour it on. And you also know that you don't have to play that way when you're up 2-1 on aggregate with an away goal. You can just sit there and defend and use Dennis Bouanga's pace and his terrific finishing ability. And this is why they are in a position to do something that no MLS team has ever done. Not just because they're great, and from a talent perspective, obviously they're right up there with any team this league has ever seen. But because they're actually built to win the trophies that are going to get them to this kind of place that has never been reached by a team from this league. And they're not there yet. Because you still got to win the trophies. One MLS Cup in a season where there's a real argument you weren't the best team in the league, as good as they were, is not enough. Getting to a Concacaf Champions League final. After that, you're getting closer, still not enough. But what they have the opportunity to do because of how good they are, because of their depth, because of their brilliance, is that they can separate themselves from just about everybody else by successfully juggling these competitions this season. And John Thornton has talked about this. They're in the business of winning all of them. And they should be. And they have the team to do it. The question is, can they actually execute? So far, so good, right? They are on pace. Maybe they don't win the Supporters' Shield because they're juggling a little bit, although they're still in a really good spot to do that. But you're going to feel really good about their chances in MLS Cup, barring some kind of disaster. They are in the final of the Concacaf Champions League. And, of course, they're going to be among the favorites for the Open Cup. And not that they have to win all three of them. But what has really been a challenge for the best MLS teams, and the Union are going through it this season, is what happens when you have to increase your workload and your schedule. Those extra games are brutal. Ask the Seattle Sounders, right? I will continue to believe that's the best Sounders team we've seen. It's the one that won the Concacaf Champions League. First MLS team to ever do it. They were the best team on the continent. And then what happened? They didn't make the playoffs. In large part because they were so focused on the Concacaf Champions League at the beginning of last season. And they could just never get it going. LAFC haven't had that problem. And now they're almost done with the Concacaf Champions League. That is how they're going to separate themselves and just take what a club can be in this league to a whole nother level. Time will tell if they can do it. But that is the opportunity they have because of everything that they've done so well, their execution on the field, their tactical flexibility. And you will never be able to convince me that we'd be talking this way about LAFC if Bob Bradley was still manager. And I like Bob Bradley. I know that it's not going well in Toronto right now. But his style of play, his philosophy, is not built for trophies. It is built to win in the regular season, to be excellent game after game after game. And you can make an argument, Pep Guardiola is the same way. Although he does have plenty of non-regular season trophies to back it up. I get that. But this LAFC team has every tool, everything necessary to be the best team in the continent and beat whoever stands in their way, be it the Union, Tigres, some other Liga MX team, to play with the best and to not let that impact kind of their day-to-day operations in MLS. That is something we haven't seen before. And that's the position this team is now in.